The crimson warning lights bathed the Galactic Council chamber in an eerie glow as Keeper Zathros stepped forward, his ancient robes trailing behind him. The assembled representatives from 47 different species fell silent, their various forms of communication ceasing as the Guardian's presence commanded attention. For 3,000 years, the Keepers had protected the galaxy from threats beyond imagination, and never once had Zathros appeared before the Council with such urgency. Honored members, Zathros began, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. I bring news of a species that has awakened in the Outer Rim. They call themselves humans, and they have discovered faster than light travel. A ripple of dismissive sounds echoed through the chamber. The Vorthan representative, Ambassador Klexus, let out what could only be described as a mechanical laugh. Another primitive species with crude technology? Keeper, surely you jest. We have protocols for such matters. Zathros raised one of his forearms, the gesture instantly silencing the chamber. You misunderstand the gravity of this situation. I have observed these humans for 50 of their years. They are unlike anything we have encountered before. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing every delegate to lean forward. They do not fear death as other species do. They embrace it as a tool. The Quilarian delegate, her crystalline form shimmering with amusement, spoke in her melodic voice. Fear is the foundation of survival, Guardian. No species can thrive without it. That is precisely what makes them dangerous, Zathros replied, his ancient eyes reflecting scenes of distant battles. I witnessed them fight a war that consumed their entire planet for 6 years. Not for resources, not for territory, but for an idea. They called it freedom. Millions died, and still they fought. Ambassador Klexus waved a metallic appendage dismissively. Barbaric. Such a species will destroy itself within decades. We have seen this pattern countless times. Zathros moved to the center of the chamber, where a holographic display materialized at his command. Images of Earth appeared, showing sprawling cities, massive industrial complexes, and ships launching into space. Observe their rate of advancement. In 100 years, they progressed from simple flight to landing on their moon. In another 50 years, they built permanent stations in space. Their technology grows exponentially, driven by something no other species possesses. And what might that be? Asked the hegemony representative, his insectoid features clicking with skepticism. Curiosity married to desperation, Zathros answered. They explore not just because they can, but because they believe they must. Every human expedition into the unknown is driven by the assumption that somewhere out there lies either their salvation or their doom, and they are equally prepared for both outcomes. The chamber erupted in dismissive chatter. Several delegates began discussing trade opportunities and resource extraction rights for this new primitive species. The Nexari ambassador, her serpentine form coiled in amusement, hissed softly. Guardian, your concerns are noted, but surely you overestimate this threat. We have the combined might of 47 civilizations, weapons that can crack planets, and shields that can withstand supernovas. What can one species of primitives do against such power? Zathros felt the familiar weight of futility that came with warnings unheeded. I have seen their military doctrine. They do not fight to win quickly or efficiently. They fight to ensure their enemy can never recover. They call it total war, and they have refined it across centuries of conflict. Fascinating anthropology lesson, Klexus interrupted, but hardly relevant to galactic security. Their ships are fusion-powered relics. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and primitive energy beams. We have technologies they cannot even comprehend. The Guardian's expression grew somber as he gestured toward the holographic display. New images appeared showing human soldiers in various conflicts throughout their history. Technology is not their strength. Adaptation is. When they encountered a problem they could not solve with existing tools, they created new ones. When faced with enemies they could not defeat through conventional means, they changed the definition of conventional. The display showed footage from human conflicts. Soldiers fighting in Arctic conditions at temperatures that would kill most galactic species. Humans surviving in deserts that resembled toxic worlds. Battles fought in environments so hostile they seemed like alien planets. They do not fight fair. They do not honor surrender when their existence is threatened. And, most importantly, They remember every defeat and learn from it. A younger delegate from the Ashanti collective stood up, her bioluminescent patches flickering with curiosity. Guardian, what exactly are you proposing we do? First contact protocols exist for primitive species. Zathros turned his ancient gaze upon her, and, for a moment, she felt as though she was looking into the depths of time itself. I propose we evacuate the outer rim sectors immediately. Establish a quarantine zone spanning at least 50 light-years around their solar system. Do not engage them. Do not attempt to trade with them. Do not let them know we exist. The chamber fell silent, then exploded with outraged voices. Evacuate. From primitives? This is absurd. The Guardian has finally lost his grip on reality. Ambassador Klexus's mechanical voice cut through the chaos. Keeper Zathros, with all due respect, your suggestion is not only impractical but insulting. The Vorthan Confederacy alone possesses the firepower to sterilize 1,000 worlds. You ask us to flee from a species that has barely left its own star system. Zathros waited for the chamber to quiet before speaking again. I have walked among them. I have studied their culture, their history, their psychology. They have a saying, it is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. This is not metaphor to them. This is doctrine. He gestured again, and the display showed human space stations and early colony ships. Look at their expansion pattern. They do not establish colonies for luxury or convenience. They build them as lifeboats, as backup plans, as launching points for further expansion. Every human settlement is designed to survive independently and support further growth. So they are prolific breeders, the Quilarian delegate noted. Many species expand rapidly in their early spacefaring period. They will stabilize once they encounter the limitations of their technology. You still do not understand, Zathros said, his voice carrying a note of desperation. They do not accept limitations. When they encountered the barrier of atmospheric flight, they built rockets. When they faced the challenge of space travel, they built ships. When they realized they could not communicate across interstellar distances, they developed quantum entanglement communication in 40 years. The Nexari ambassador uncoiled slightly, her interest piqued. Quantum entanglement communication? That technology took us 3 centuries to develop after we discovered the theoretical foundation. They developed the theory and the practical application simultaneously, Zathros continued, because they needed it to work, and they do not accept that something cannot be done simply because no one has done it before. The room grew quieter as some delegates began to reconsider the Guardian's words. However, Ambassador Klexus remained unmoved. Guardian, even if everything you say is true, they remain a single species confined to a handful of worlds. The galaxy contains billions of systems and trillions of beings. Mathematics alone makes your concerns irrelevant. Zathros moved closer to the Vorthan delegate, his presence suddenly seeming to fill the chamber. Mathematics. Yes, let us discuss mathematics, Ambassador. How many species in galactic history have fought wars lasting longer than their average lifespan? Klexus processed the question through his mechanical systems. Unknown. Most species cease hostilities when the cost exceeds the benefit, typically within a few decades at most. Humans fought a war that lasted 116 years, Zathros stated. Multiple generations died for a conflict their great-grandchildren would eventually finish. They passed the purpose of the war from parent to child like a sacred duty. The chamber had grown completely silent now. Every delegate focused on the Guardian's words. How many species have deliberately destroyed their own strategic resources to prevent enemy acquisition? Zathros continued. Again, Klexus found no data. Such behavior would be considered irrational self-destruction. Humans call it scorched earth policy. They will burn their own worlds rather than allow an enemy to benefit from conquest. They have done this repeatedly throughout their history, and they call it patriotism. The bioluminescent delegate from the Ashanti collective spoke up again. Guardian, these sound like the actions of a desperate and dying species, not a galactic threat. Zathros smiled grimly. That is the error every human enemy has made. They mistake human desperation for weakness, when in fact it is their greatest strength. A desperate human is not seeking victory, Ambassador. A desperate human is seeking to ensure that if they fall, their enemy falls with them. He gestured one final time at the holographic display. New images appeared showing human technological advancement, population growth, and resource utilization rates. They have been in space for less than a century, yet they have already established permanent settlements on 12 worlds. Their population grows at a rate that will double every 50 years. Their resource consumption increases exponentially, but so does their efficiency in obtaining those resources. At current rates, Zathros continued, his voice steady and measured, they will control 100 systems within 3 centuries, 1,000 systems within 6 centuries. And, unlike every other species we have encountered, they do not slow their expansion when they achieve comfort. Comfort makes them curious about what lies beyond their borders. The hegemony representatives' insectoid features clicked nervously. Surely they can be reasoned with. Diplomatic contact, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. They cannot be reasoned with because they do not reason like us, Zathros replied. They make decisions based on principles that transcend individual survival. They will die for abstract concepts. They will sacrifice certainty for possibility. And, most dangerous of all, they will unite against any external threat, regardless of their internal differences. Ambassador Klexis had been processing data throughout the Guardian's speech. Keeper, your projections assume they will maintain current expansion rates indefinitely. All species eventually reach equilibrium points based on available resources and technological limitations. What happens when those limitations are other species? Zathros asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every delegate suddenly understood the implications. They will not stop expanding because they encounter us, Zathros continued. They will expand through us, around us, or in spite of us. And if we attempt to stop them, they will expand over us. The chamber erupted once again, but this time the voices carried notes of genuine concern mixed with the indignation. This is speculation. The Guardian seeks to frighten us with ghost stories. No species could pose such a threat to the established galactic order. Zathros raised his hand for silence one final time. When the chamber grew quiet, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I have observed them for 50 years. I have walked among them, learned their languages, studied their cultures. I know what they are capable of because I have seen them do the impossible repeatedly. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces representing hundreds of billions of beings across the galaxy. They have a word in their languages, impossible. In every other species I have studied, this word represents a boundary, a limit, an endpoint. To humans, it represents a challenge. The Guardian began to move toward the chamber's exit, his duty completed regardless of the outcome. You will not heed my warning. I understand this. You see a primitive species with crude technology and assume superiority. This is the same assumption made by every empire humans have ever encountered. As he reached the chamber doors, Zathros turned back one final time. When they arrive at your borders, remember this conversation. Remember that you had the opportunity to avoid this encounter entirely. And remember that everything I have told you today was not speculation or fear, but observation of historical fact. The massive doors began to close behind the Guardian, but his voice carried clearly through the chamber. They are coming, not as conquerors seeking dominion, but as explorers seeking answers. They will not stop because you tell them to stop. They will not turn back because you threaten them. They will not negotiate away their expansion because you offer them alternatives. The doors sealed with a resonant click, leaving the Guardian's final words echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. They will arrive here eventually, because this is where the universe leads, and humans always follow where the universe leads them. For several moments, no delegate spoke. The implications of the Guardian's warning settled over them like a shroud, each representative processing the information through the lens of their own species' psychology and capabilities. Ambassador Klexis was the first to break the silence. The Guardian speaks in riddles and metaphors. We are discussing galactic security policy, not participating in a philosophy lecture. Gradually, the other delegates began to voice their agreement. The moment of uncertainty passed as species after species dismissed the warning as the paranoid fantasies of an ancient being who had spent too long observing primitive cultures. Within hours, the Council had voted unanimously to proceed with standard first contact protocols for the human species. Trade negotiations would be initiated. Cultural exchange programs would be established. Technology transfers would be arranged under the usual terms favorable to the established galactic order. Not a single delegate voted to implement the Guardians' recommended quarantine. Not one species chose to evacuate the Outer Rim. No additional defensive measures were authorized. They had heard the warning, considered its implications, and decided that their collective power was sufficient to handle any threat a primitive species might pose. It was a logical decision based on thousands of years of successful galactic management and the established patterns of species integration. It was also the last unanimous decision the Galactic Council would ever make. 3 years passed before humanity encountered the first alien vessel. The UNS Explorer, a deep space research ship conducting surveys near the edge of human space, detected an unknown signature approaching their position. Captain Sarah Chun ordered her crew to general quarters, following protocols established for exactly this scenario. The alien ship was magnificent. Sleek curves of unknown materials caught starlight like flowing metal, and its size dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. When it transmitted a greeting in perfect English, the entire crew fell silent with wonder. "Human vessel," the melodic voice announced. "This is Ambassador Nerith of the Quilarian Diplomatic Corps. We represent the Galactic Council and come bearing greetings from 47 civilized species. Please prepare to receive our delegation." Captain Chin stared at her communications officer, Lieutenant Martinez, who could only shrug in amazement. First contact protocols had been theoretical until this moment. Chin activated the ship's recording systems and authorized a response. "Alien vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Nations ship Explorer. We welcome you and accept your request for diplomatic contact. Please transmit your approach vector." The Quilarian ship settled into a parallel course with mechanical precision that spoke of technology far beyond human capabilities. Within hours, a small shuttle had docked with the Explorer, and Captain Chin found herself face to face with beings that defied every expectation human science fiction had ever conceived. Ambassador Nerith stood 7 feet tall, her crystalline form refracting light into rainbow patterns that shifted with her movements. Her 3 companions represented species even more exotic, a mechanical being that introduced itself as Klexus, 9, a serpentine creature called Ambassador Cythera, and something that resembled a walking flower with bioluminescent petals that called itself Delegate Zamus. The first diplomatic meeting lasted 18 hours and established frameworks for everything the Galactic Council had planned: trade agreements, technology transfers, cultural exchanges, and territorial boundaries. The humans asked questions with an eagerness that charmed the alien delegation, and their enthusiasm for galactic citizenship impressed even the cynical Klexus 9. "Your species shows remarkable adaptability," Ambassador Nerith noted as the meetings concluded. "The Council will be pleased to welcome humanity into the galactic community." Captain Chun smiled broadly, imagining the celebration that would greet her return to Earth. "We're honored by your invitation, Ambassador. When can we expect formal admission to the Council?" "Standard protocols require a probationary period of 50 years, Klexus 9 replied. "During this time, your species will be restricted to your current territories while you demonstrate your ability to integrate peacefully with galactic society." The smile faded from Captain Chen's face. 50 years? And restricted to our current territories? "Ambassador, humanity expands naturally. We have colony ships already en route to systems throughout this region." Ambassador Nerith's crystalline form shifted to what the humans would later learn indicated mild concern. "Those ships will need to be recalled. Expansion beyond designated territories is not permitted for probationary species." "I don't think you understand," Captain Chin said carefully. "Those ships carry families. They're planning to establish homes, communities, entire societies. We can't just order them to turn around." "Surely you can transmit new orders," Delegate Zamus suggested, its petals flickering with confusion. "All civilized species maintain centralized authority over their expansion activities." Captain Chin looked at her first officer, Commander Rodriguez, who was frantically reviewing the diplomatic briefing materials. The truth was becoming clear, and it wasn't what either side had expected. Ambassadors, Captain Chen said slowly. Humanity doesn't have centralized authority over expansion. Our colonies are independent once they're established. Each one makes its own decisions about growth and exploration. The alien delegation exchanged what humans would later recognize as expressions of alarm. Ambassador Cythera coiled more tightly, her serpentine form betraying nervousness. This is highly irregular. How do you maintain order? How do you prevent unauthorized expansion? We don't prevent it, Commander Rodriguez replied honestly. If a group of humans wants to explore and settle new worlds, they organize the mission and go. Individual colonies decide their own policies about further expansion. Plexus 9's mechanical processes whirred audibly as he processed this information. This suggests a lack of central control that could prove problematic for integration protocols. Captain Chun was beginning to understand that this first contact was not going as either side had anticipated. Ambassadors, I think we need to clarify some fundamental differences in how our societies operate. Humanity values individual freedom and initiative. We don't restrict exploration or expansion unless it directly threatens other human communities. And what happens when your expansion threatens non-human communities? Ambassador Nareth asked, her tone carrying a sharp edge for the first time. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Captain Chen realized she was about to deliver humanity's answer to a question that would define their relationship with the galaxy. We would attempt to negotiate peaceful coexistence, she said carefully. Humans prefer cooperation to conflict when possible. And when cooperation is not possible. Plexus 9 pressed. Captain Chen met his optical sensors directly. Then, we would do what we felt was necessary to protect our people and our interests. The alien delegation fell silent. Ambassador Naretha's form shifted through several color patterns before settling on what appeared to be a deeper, more serious hue. Captain, I think we need to transmit a full report to the Council before these negotiations continue. Of course, Captain Chen agreed. We should probably do the same with Earth. As the alien delegation prepared to return to their ship, Ambassador Cythera approached Captain Chen privately. Captain, may I ask you a personal question? Certainly, Ambassador. What would humans do if the Galactic Council refused to permit your expansion into certain regions of space? Captain Chun considered the question carefully before answering. We would want to understand the reasons for such restrictions. If they were reasonable and served legitimate purposes, most human communities would probably respect them. And if the restrictions were deemed unreasonable, again, Captain Chen paused. She was beginning to understand that her answer would carry implications far beyond diplomatic protocol. Ambassador, humans have a long history of rejecting restrictions we consider unjust, regardless of the authority imposing them. Ambassador Cythera's serpentine features shifted into what might have been a smile. I thought that might be your answer. Thank you for your honesty, Captain. The alien delegation departed, leaving the explorer crew to contemplate what they had just experienced. Captain Chen immediately ordered the ship to return to Earth at maximum speed while transmitting a full report of the encounter. The response from Earth arrived 36 hours later. Proceed with all planned expansion activities. Do not accept territorial restrictions without full review by the United Nations Colonial Council. Maintain friendly relations with alien delegation while protecting human interests. Ambassador Naretha's report to the Galactic Council carried a different tone entirely. The humans demonstrate concerning patterns of decentralized authority and resistance to regulation. They appear to consider expansion a fundamental right rather than a privileged subject to galactic law. Recommend elevated oversight and possible containment protocols. The Council's response was swift and decisive. Within 6 months, a combined fleet representing 12 species had established monitoring stations throughout human space. These stations, while diplomatically described as cultural exchange centers, were clearly military installations designed to observe and control human expansion. The humans noticed immediately. Colony ship UNS New Horizon was the first to encounter a monitoring station during its approach to the Kepler 442 system. The station sat directly in the path to their planned settlement site, and its commanding officer, Admiral Thexes of the Vorthan Confederacy, transmitted what was intended as a routine traffic control message. Human vessel, you are entering a restricted system. Alter course to designated safe passage corridor and proceed to registration station for territorial assignment. Captain Lisa Park, commanding the New Horizon with 4,000 sleeping colonists in her care, responded exactly as any human captain would under such circumstances. Alien Station, this is Captain Park of the UNS New Horizon. We are en route to establish a colony in this system under United Nations Charter. Please clarify your authority to restrict our passage. Human vessel, this system has been designated as a buffer zone under Galactic Council Resolution 2847. Unauthorized settlement is prohibited. You will comply with redirect orders immediately. Captain Park studied the massive alien station on her displays. It was clearly armed and outnumbered her ship by a factor of 10. Any reasonable species would have complied with the orders and sought diplomatic resolution through proper channels. Captain Park was human. Alien Station, the United Nations has not signed any agreement recognizing Galactic Council authority over human expansion rights. We intend to proceed with our mission. If you attempt to interfere with this lawful activity, we will defend ourselves. Admiral Thexes found himself in a position no Galactic Council strategic planning had anticipated. The humans were not backing down despite their obvious tactical disadvantage. They were not requesting diplomatic intervention. They were not attempting to negotiate alternative arrangements. They were preparing to fight a superior force for the right to land on an empty planet. Human vessel, you have no chance of success against this station. Your weapons are primitive, and your ship is designed for transport, not combat. Stand down immediately. Captain Park's response would be remembered throughout human space as the moment their species announced their true nature to the galaxy. Alien Station, you are correct that we cannot defeat your weapons in direct combat. However, this ship carries 4,000 human beings who have given up everything they own to build new lives in this system. We will not turn back because you order us to turn back. If you wish to stop us, you will have to destroy us. That is not acceptable, Admiral Thexes replied, genuinely confused by the human position. We seek to prevent unauthorized settlement, not commit mass murder. Then, don't stop us, Captain Park said simply. The standoff lasted 6 hours while Admiral Thexes requested guidance from the Galactic Council. During those 6 hours, Captain Park did something that would become standard human procedure in such situations. She awakened her colonists and informed them of the situation. The vote was unanimous. 4,000 humans chose to proceed with their mission despite the threat of superior alien forces. Not one colonist voted to turn back. When Admiral Thexes received his orders, he discovered that the Galactic Council had failed to provide clear guidance for this scenario. They had authorized him to enforce territorial restrictions but had not anticipated that humans would choose death over compliance. The New Horizon proceeded to its destination planet. Admiral Thexes allowed them to pass rather than commit genocide against beings whose only crime was refusing to abandon their chosen home. Within weeks, 17 more human colony ships encountered similar monitoring stations. 17 times, human captains made the same choice as Captain Park. 17 times, alien commanders faced the same impossible decision as Admiral Thexes. 17 times, the humans proceeded to their destinations. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address what was being called the human problem. Ambassador Nareth stood before the assembled delegates with a report that challenged every assumption they had made about the newest species in their territory. Honored representatives, she began, humanity has rejected our territorial restrictions entirely. They do not recognize our authority to regulate their expansion, and they appear willing to die rather than accept limitations on their colonial activities. Ambassador Klexus, 9 processed this information with mechanical precision. Have they made military threats against Council forces? No, Ambassador Nareth replied. They simply ignore our presence and continue their expansion activities. When confronted with superior force, they do not retreat or negotiate. They proceed with their missions and dare us to destroy them. The Nexari representative, Ambassador Cythera, coiled nervously. This is highly irregular behavior. Most species seek diplomatic solutions when faced with superior force. Humans appear to consider forced compliance with restrictions they did not agree to as a fate worse than death, Ambassador Nerith continued. They are establishing colonies throughout the disputed territories, and our forces are unable to stop them without resorting to mass destruction. The chamber erupted in concerned voices. Delegates who had dismissed the Guardian's warning 3 years earlier were beginning to understand that humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic affairs. Ambassador Klexis, 9, raised a metallic appendage for attention. What is their current expansion rate? Ambassador Nerith's crystalline form shifted to a somber hue. They have established 43 new colonies in the past 6 months. Each colony becomes operational within weeks of landing and begins preparations for supporting further expansion. At current rates, they will have over 200 settlements within 3 years. Impossible, declared the hegemony representative. No species can sustain such rapid expansion without central planning and resource allocation. That's what makes them so difficult to predict or control, Ambassador Nerith replied. Each human colony operates independently. They don't require permission from Earth or any central authority to establish new settlements. If a group of humans decides they want to explore and settle a new world, they organize themselves and go. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. Every other species in the galaxy operated under centralized authority structures that could be negotiated with, pressured, or controlled through traditional diplomatic means. Humanity appeared to be organized around principles that made such control impossible. Ambassador Cythera spoke carefully. What do they want? Every species wants something. Power, resources, security, knowledge. If we can identify their primary motivation, we can find a way to manage their expansion. Ambassador Nerith's form shifted through several color patterns before settling on one that suggested deep uncertainty. According to their statements, they want to explore and settle suitable worlds throughout the galaxy. When asked about their ultimate goals, they give various answers: scientific advancement, cultural preservation, resource acquisition, population dispersal, and simple curiosity. Those are contradictory motivations, noted the Quilarian delegate. Yes, Ambassador Nerith agreed. Because different human groups have different motivations. They are not a unified species working toward common goals. They are millions of independent communities, each pursuing their own version of human flourishing. Ambassador Klexis 9's processing systems worked audibly as he analyzed this data. This suggests that negotiating with one human authority would not bind other human communities to the same agreements. Correct, Ambassador Nerith confirmed. Even if Earth agreed to territorial restrictions, individual human colonies could choose to ignore those agreements. And, according to human law, they would have every right to do so. The implications settled over the chamber like a weight. The Galactic Council had built its authority on the principle of negotiating with centralized governments that could control their species' expansion. Humanity operated on principles that made such control impossible. Ambassador Cythera raised the question that was on every delegate's mind. What are our options? Ambassador Nerith's report concluded with 3 possibilities that would define the galaxy's future. We can accept unlimited human expansion and modify galactic law to accommodate their methods. We can attempt to enforce territorial restrictions through military action, which would require destroying human colonies and potentially sparking a war with Earth. Or we can evacuate the disputed territories and allow humans to expand freely while establishing defensive barriers around our existing space. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours and ended with a decision that would prove to be the second greatest mistake in galactic history. The first mistake had been ignoring the Guardian's warning. The second was assuming that humans would respond to force the way every other species had throughout galactic history. The Galactic Council voted to implement Enforcement Protocol Omega, military action to prevent further human expansion and forced relocation of existing human colonies to designated reservation territories. The combined fleets of 20 species would deliver an ultimatum to humanity: accept territorial restrictions or face the consequences of defying galactic law. The vote was unanimous except for one abstention. The Guardian Zathros had been present for the session but had not spoken during the debates. When asked for his vote, he simply stood and walked from the chamber without a word. 3 days later, the largest military fleet in galactic history departed for human space with orders to enforce compliance through whatever means necessary. Admiral Vexton of the Nexari Naval Command had been chosen to deliver humanity's ultimatum personally. None of the ships in that fleet would return home unchanged. Most would not return home at all. Admiral Vexton's fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Sol system with mathematical precision, their formations designed to demonstrate overwhelming force while maintaining diplomatic protocol. 1,000 ships from 20 different species surrounded Earth in a display of power that should have ended human expansion forever. The response from Earth came within minutes, transmitted by Secretary General Maria Santos herself. Alien Fleet, this is Earth United Nations Command. State your intentions immediately. Admiral Vexton had rehearsed this moment for months. The ultimatum had been crafted by the Council's finest diplomatic minds to be clear, reasonable, and impossible to misunderstand. Human leadership, I am Admiral Vexton representing the combined authority of the Galactic Council. You will immediately recall all colonial expeditions beyond your designated territories and prepare for relocation of unauthorized settlements. You have 72 hours to demonstrate compliance before enforcement measures begin. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 minutes. When Secretary General Santos responded, her voice carried a tone that Admiral Vexton would later describe as colder than empty space. Admiral Vexton, humanity rejects your ultimatum in its entirety. Our colonies are established under human law on worlds that belong to no one. We will not abandon our people because you order us to abandon them. If you attempt to harm human beings or human settlements, we will consider it an act of war. Admiral Vexton found himself in the same impossible position his subordinates had faced months earlier. The humans were not negotiating. They were not requesting mediation. They were not seeking compromise or alternative solutions. They were preparing for war against a force that outnumbered their entire space fleet by more than 50 to 1. Human leadership, you cannot prevail against this force. We possess weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds. Compliance is your only rational option. Admiral, Secretary General Santos replied. You seem to believe that fear of death will make us abandon our principles. You are incorrect. Humanity has faced extinction before and chosen to fight rather than surrender. We will do so again if necessary. What happened next would be studied in military academies throughout the galaxy for generations. Earth did not mobilize its pitifully small space fleet for a hopeless battle. Instead, they did something no species in galactic history had ever attempted when faced with superior force. They called their children home. Every human colony, every exploration ship, every research station, every mining operation received the same message: Earth is under threat. All human assets return immediately for homeland defense. The message included complete technical data about alien capabilities, tactical assessments of the threatening fleet, and detailed instructions for conversion of civilian vessels into combat platforms. Admiral Vexton watched in growing alarm as human ships began arriving from throughout the Outer Rim. Cargo haulers equipped with improvised weapons. Colony ships retrofitted with armor plating and missile launchers. Even passenger liners carrying families fleeing from distant settlements arrived, armed for battle. Within 48 hours, Earth was surrounded by over 3,000 human vessels. Most were civilian conversions that would last minutes against proper warships. None carried weapons that could penetrate modern military shields. Every single ship was crewed by humans who had chosen to return home to fight impossible odds rather than abandon their homeworld. Admiral Vexton requested guidance from the Galactic Council. The response was immediate and unambiguous. Proceed with enforcement. Resistance confirms human unsuitability for galactic membership. At exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum, Admiral Vexton opened fire. The Battle of Sol lasted 6 hours and redefined galactic understanding of warfare forever. The humans lost over 2,000 ships in the first hour. Their improvised weapons caused minimal damage to advanced alien shields. Their tactics were crude, desperate, and completely ineffective against superior technology. And they kept fighting. Ships that had lost all weapons continued ramming alien vessels. Crews trapped in disabled hulks activated self-destruct systems to damage nearby enemies. Pilots whose fighters had been shot to pieces ejected into space, and continued firing handheld weapons until their air supplies ran out. By the fourth hour, Admiral Vexton realized something was terribly wrong. His fleet had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and tactical advantages in every category. They should have achieved complete victory within minutes. Instead, they were fighting for their lives against enemies who refused to acknowledge that they had been defeated. The turning point came when the UNS Defiance, a converted cargo hauler carrying evacuated civilians from the outer colonies, broke through alien lines and rammed directly into Admiral Vexton's command ship. The explosion destroyed both vessels instantly, killing Admiral Vexton and over 5,000 human civilians who had chosen to sacrifice their lives to eliminate the enemy commander. Command of the alien fleet passed to Admiral Claxon of the Hegemony Forces. His first action was to request immediate reinforcements from the Galactic Council. His second action was to establish a siege perimeter around Earth rather than continue direct assault. The humans used the respite to do something that defied every principle of civilized warfare. They conscripted their entire population for total war. Every human being on Earth was assigned to war production, logistics support, or military service. Children as young as 10 worked in munitions factories. Elderly citizens who could barely walk operated communication systems. Scientists abandoned pure research to develop new weapons technologies. Artists created propaganda to maintain civilian morale. Within weeks, human industrial capacity was producing war materials at rates that exceeded anything in galactic records. More importantly, they were innovating new technologies specifically designed to counter alien advantages. The humans had studied captured alien equipment for months. They understood that they could not match alien technology, so they had done something characteristically human. They had changed the rules of the game. Human quantum torpedoes were crude devices that disrupted alien shield technologies by creating localized space-time distortions. Human swarm fighters were unmanned drones operated by artificial intelligences that made tactical decisions faster than any biological mind could process. Human kinetic bombardment platforms accelerated simple metal projectiles to percentages of light speed, creating weapons that could penetrate any known armor through pure kinetic energy. None of these technologies were more advanced than existing alien equipment. They were simply different enough to be effective against enemies who had prepared for conventional warfare. Admiral Claxon found his siege perimeter under constant attack by weapons his forces had never encountered. Worse, the humans were learning and adapting with every engagement. Tactics that worked against them once never worked twice. Technologies that proved effective were immediately copied and improved. The siege of Earth lasted 8 months. During that time, human colonies throughout the galaxy received updates on new technologies and tactical innovations. Instead of huddling in fear, they began attacking alien installations throughout their regions. The Kepler 442 colony, where Captain Park had first defied alien authority, launched raids against Galactic Council monitoring stations. The New Horizon settlement developed new weapons and shared the designs with other colonies. Human exploration fleets, rather than returning to Earth's defense, spread deeper into unexplored space, establishing hidden bases and supply depots. Humanity's response to overwhelming force was not retreat or surrender, but expansion and adaptation. Every alien action designed to limit human growth instead accelerated it. Every restriction imposed by galactic law was ignored or circumvented. Every military defeat was analyzed and converted into tactical advantages for future engagements. The Galactic Council found itself fighting a war unlike anything in their history. Previous conflicts had involved negotiations between civilized governments seeking rational outcomes. Humanity appeared to be treating the war as an opportunity for species advancement rather than a diplomatic problem requiring resolution. Guardian Zathros appeared before the Council for the second time in 5 years. The assembled delegates, their ranks now depleted by the ongoing conflict, listened with desperate attention as the Ancient Being delivered his final warning. "You have created the very future I warned you to avoid," he began, his voice carrying the weight of inevitable tragedy. "Humanity is not seeking victory in this war. They are seeking evolution. Every challenge you present makes them stronger. Every restriction you impose makes them more creative. Every defeat you inflict makes them more determined. Ambassador Nerith, her crystalline form now showing stress fractures from months of war planning, spoke for the surviving council members. Guardian, help us understand how to end this conflict. Surely there must be terms humanity would accept. Zathros moved to the center of the chamber where holographic displays showed the current state of the war. Red indicators throughout the galaxy marked human positions, alien losses, and active combat zones. The pattern was unmistakable. Humanity was winning through sheer persistence and innovation. There are no terms they will accept, Zathros replied. You demanded they abandon their expansion and submit to galactic authority. They will die before accepting such terms. More importantly, they will ensure you die with them before accepting such terms. The surviving delegates absorbed this information with growing despair. Ambassador Klexus, 9, his mechanical systems showing battle damage from recent engagements, processed the strategic implications. Guardian, what outcome do you foresee if this conflict continues? Zathros gestured at the displays showing galactic-wide combat operations. Humanity will continue expanding throughout the galaxy, establishing hidden colonies and supply bases. They will continue developing new technologies specifically designed to counter your advantages. They will continue converting every interaction with your forces into learning opportunities that make them more dangerous. But surely our superior numbers and technology will eventually prevail, insisted the Nexery representative, her serpentine form coiled with nervous energy. Your numbers diminish with every engagement, Zathros replied. Human numbers grow. Your technology remains static while theirs evolves daily. You are fighting a war of attrition against a species that considers attrition a victory condition. The terrible truth of the Guardian's words was confirmed by reports from the front lines. Human forces were not trying to win battles in any conventional sense. They were trading losses for intelligence, sacrificing ships for tactical data, accepting defeats that would cripple other species because each defeat taught them something new. Ambassador Nerith voiced the question every delegate was afraid to ask. What do you recommend we do? Zathros looked around the chamber at the remnants of galactic civilization's greatest achievement. The Galactic Council, which had maintained peace and order for 3,000 years, was collapsing under the strain of fighting a war against enemies who refused to fight by established rules. Surrender, he said simply. The word echoed through the chamber like a physical blow. Every delegate recoiled from the concept. Surrender to a primitive species that had achieved space flight barely a century ago was unthinkable. Guardian, Ambassador Klexus, 9 protested, surrender is not acceptable. The precedent alone would destabilize galactic civilization. No established species could maintain authority if we capitulated to human demands. What demands? Zathros asked. Humanity has never demanded anything from you except the right to expand freely throughout unoccupied space. They do not seek to rule you. They do not want your territory. They do not desire your resources or your subjugation. Then, what do they want? Ambassador Nerith asked desperately. To be left alone, Zathros replied. They want to explore, settle, and develop any worlds they can reach without interference from species they never asked to join. They want the freedom to make their own choices about their future without submitting those choices for approval to authorities they do not recognize. The council chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. Everything they had assumed about human motivations was wrong. Humanity was not seeking galactic conquest or dominion over other species. They simply wanted to be free to pursue their own expansion without external control. Ambassador Cythera uncoiled slightly as understanding dawned. You're saying we could have avoided this entire war by simply allowing them to settle empty worlds throughout the galaxy? Yes, Zathros confirmed. But you could not accept that a species might reject your authority entirely. You assumed that because you possessed superior force, humans would submit to your regulations. You never considered that they might choose death over submission. The bitter irony was not lost on the surviving delegates. The war that was destroying galactic civilization could have been avoided entirely if the Council had simply ignored humanity's expansion into unoccupied territory. It is too late for such regrets now, Zathros continued. Humanity has learned that galactic civilization will resort to force to control them. They will never again trust alien promises or accept alien authority. The war has taught them that their survival depends on becoming strong enough that no one can threaten them. Admiral Claxon's voice crackled through the chamber's communication systems, carrying the exhaustion of months of futile combat. Council members, I am requesting immediate withdrawal of all forces to defensive positions. Human tactics have evolved to the point where offensive operations are no longer sustainable. They are now actively hunting our fleets throughout the galaxy. The final reports from the human war, as historians would later call it, documented the complete collapse of galactic military authority. Human forces had not conquered alien territory or destroyed enemy civilizations. Instead, they had made continued aggression against human interests prohibitively expensive. Every alien ship that attacked human settlements was eventually hunted down and destroyed. Every alien base that supported anti-human operations was infiltrated and eliminated. Every alien world that participated in military action against humanity found their space lanes disrupted and their trade routes compromised. Humanity had not won the war through superior force. They had won by making the cost of continuing the war higher than any rational species was willing to pay. The Galactic Council's final session convened with only 12 species represented. The others had withdrawn from the conflict and established separate peace agreements with human colonial authorities. The vote to end hostilities was unanimous. The peace treaty negotiated between humanity and the remaining galactic species established principles that would govern interstellar relations for the next millennium. Humanity gained recognition of their right to expand freely throughout unoccupied space. Alien species gained humanity's promise not to interfere with existing galactic civilizations or claim territory already occupied by other species. The treaty also established humanity's most important contribution to galactic law, the principle of non-interference. No species could restrict the expansion or development of any other species into unoccupied territory. No species could impose their authority over another without explicit consent. No species could use force to compel compliance with regulations the target species had not agreed to accept. Guardian Zathros attended the treaty signing ceremony as an observer. When asked by human reporters about his thoughts on the outcome, his response became one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. Humanity has taught the galaxy something it had forgotten, he said. Freedom is not a privilege granted by authority. It is a right that must be defended by those who wish to keep it. You have reminded us that the universe belongs to no one, and therefore belongs to everyone willing to reach for it. The years following the human war saw unprecedented expansion throughout the galaxy as species after species adopted human principles of independent exploration and settlement. The rigid territorial boundaries maintained by the old Galactic Council gave way to a dynamic network of expanding civilizations, each pursuing their own vision of growth while respecting the rights of others. Humanity continued expanding at rates that amazed even their former enemies. Human colonies spread throughout the galaxy, establishing trade networks, research stations, and cultural exchanges with dozens of species. The humans who had been willing to die for the right to explore became the galaxy's most enthusiastic ambassadors for peaceful coexistence. But the galaxy never forgot the lesson of the human war. When faced with extinction, humanity had not sought mercy or negotiated surrender. They had adapted, evolved, and ultimately prevailed through sheer determination to remain free. The memorial to the unknown human, erected on the former site of the Galactic Council chambers, bore a simple inscription that summarized humanity's impact on galactic civilization. They were asked to stop. They refused. The galaxy is better for their refusal. Future species encountering humanity throughout their expansion found them to be generous allies, enthusiastic trading partners, and invaluable sources of innovation and cultural exchange. But every alien diplomat, military commander, and political leader learned the same fundamental truth about dealing with humans that the old Galactic Council had discovered too late. Humanity could be reasoned with, negotiated with, and befriended. They could be trusted to honor agreements they had made willingly. They would share their knowledge freely and defend their allies courageously. But they could never be controlled. They would never accept restrictions on their freedom to explore, expand, and develop according to their own vision of human flourishing. And any force that attempted to impose such restrictions would discover that humans were willing to pay any price and make any sacrifice to ensure that force failed. The Guardian's warning, dismissed by the old Galactic Council as the paranoid fears of an ancient being, became the fundamental principle of interstellar diplomacy. Humanity will not be ruled. They will not be caged. They will not be stopped. Work with them or work around them, but never work against them. The universe is large enough for all of us, but only if we remember that freedom, once claimed, is never willingly surrendered. The galaxy learned to live with humanity's expansion, and, in doing so, learned to value the freedom humanity had fought to preserve. The chaos and destruction of the human war gave way to an era of unprecedented exploration, innovation, and peaceful coexistence that lasted for thousands of years. But every species remembered the warning that had been ignored, the war that could have been avoided, and the lesson that freedom once tasted becomes a requirement for life itself. Humanity had answered the galaxy's challenge in the only way they could, by refusing to be anything other than free. And the galaxy was better for their answer.